President Trump's campaign tonight canceling planned television ads in Ohio and in Iowa for this week to instead focus on funding in states where polls show the president trailing Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden. The president's re-election campaign canceled $2.5 million worth of ads in the state of Ohio and roughly $800,000 in ads across the state of Iowa.
Tonight, the president is making his first campaign stop in Iowa since January. For a state that wasn't supposed to be competitive, the race is now tied, even though Mr. Trump won by nearly 10 points in 2016. The visit comes as Iowa surpassed 100,000 coronavirus cases this week and has logged a recent surge in hospitalizations.
And I'm in such perfect shape.
Even after catching COVID-19 himself, the president is holding one packed event after another. This billboard points to the site of tonight's rally. An estimated 10,000 people are attending, defying federal guidelines limiting large gatherings in central Iowa to 25.
Iowa. Trump could lose Iowa. That would have been unthinkable earlier in the year. But this election has become a referendum on Trump, and more specifically, Trump's COVID response. And Iowa, as was mentioned a little bit there in that CBS clip, is getting hit very hard by COVID right now as the second wave hits nationally. Right now, Iowa's test positivity rate is over 50%. That's what it was at its worst in New York. At its worst in New York, when New York was the epicenter of the virus, of the crisis, and we didn't know anything close to what we know now, like the fact that masks work, for example. And so that is going to be a huge factor in this election, and it's definitely tied to Trump's polling slide there. And I love how they're trying to save face and claiming that, oh, we want to redirect money to areas of the country where it's more competitive with Trump and Biden. Because, yeah, don't worry, Trump's got Iowa locked up. Really? Because Trump is so disconnected from what Iowans are facing, not just on COVID, on multiple levels. I told the First Lady I'm going to have the greatest publicity I've ever had tonight, President Donald Trump told the crowd on the tarmac of the Des Moines International Airport on Wednesday night. I got nominated for the Nobel Prize. I get home and turn on the TV. They're talking about your floods in Iowa. Of course, there was no major flooding in Iowa this year. Trump was complaining about the lack of media coverage for his Nobel nomination, but he confused the disastrous flooding Iowa experienced in 2019 with the derecho that struck in August. Along with the coronavirus, the disastrous derecho windstorm that destroyed hundreds of thousands of acres of crops have increased farmers' desperation. Trump came to Des Moines in an attempt to invigorate his base and swing momentum back in his favor as Election Day approaches. According to the most recent polls, Trump is neck and neck with former Vice President Joe Biden in Iowa, though he handily won the state by 9 points in his 2019 race against Hillary Clinton. Elsewhere in Iowa, there have been hints of waning support for the president as Trump slumps in the polls and local Republican proxies like Senator Joni Ernst and Governor Kim Reynolds see precipitous drops in their approval ratings. Facing a campaign cash crunch, the Trump campaign has withdrawn planned television and radio advertisements in Iowa just weeks before Election Day. Well, Trump's so rich, why doesn't he fund his own campaign? Along with ads planned in Ohio and New Hampshire. If he loses Iowa, it will be seen as a referendum on his national response to the coronavirus. Few states have embodied Trump's mandate to not be afraid of COVID-19 like Iowa has. Since the early days of the pandemic spread through the United States, Iowa's unified Republican state government and particularly its governor have been lockstep with Trump, refusing to institute a statewide mask mandate and keeping masks optional for in-person learning. Iowa surpassed California in cases per million in early September and hasn't looked back. Kind of reminds me of the Kansas experiment when Governor Sam Brownback, he just did mass tax cuts, mostly for the rich, obviously, in Kansas, and it just devastated the entire state and all of the quality of life there. It's what happens when you allow Republicans to control every part of your government, and he had nothing in his way. And the same thing's happening here in Iowa. But it's not a laughing matter, obviously, because the result is mass death and pain when it comes to coronavirus. And so, guys, if Trump loses Iowa, I mean, that is a blue wave of immense proportions. Again, we still have some time, but usually polls narrow as the election gets closer. But with COVID and the second wave hitting and suffering continuing and no stimulus deal, which again, please pass the deal, Pelosi. Trump's likely to lose anyway. It doesn't matter. You just need to get help to people. But I digress. It's not looking good for Trump, and that's putting it lightly.